From Content 360, this is the state of client acquisition. All right, so today I am very excited to be speaking to Michael Barris, who's a speaking coach who helps professionals become confident and connected speakers on social media. And he's also the best-selling author of the book, How to Become a Super Speaker. So Michael, here are the reasons why I actually wanted to talk to you. First of all, you're a professional speaker. So that was like the selfish reason. I wanted to talk to somebody who actually speaks nicely. That was the one main selfish reason. The less selfish reason was that I believe that my audience could really benefit from knowing about you, knowing about your services, because it is so important to come across well on camera, to be a good speaker, to deliver a great experience for people who are listening to you. So that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you. So thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You know, I always like your stuff. I like your kind of tough love approach that you take to helping people. It's good.
It's funny you would say that, because recently I had somebody on a prospecting call and he actually said that he did not want that. He called himself that he feels like an abused puppy, that not with me, but from the other coaches who's been working with. So he needs somebody with less of a tough love approach. So I'm glad that you appreciate that aspect. Cool. Okay, so Michael, I'm curious, first off, could you tell us about what is that transformation journey you take people on and who do you work with?
Well, I work with professionals in all fields. And the key thing is that you've probably heard this before, that people who speak publicly gain more confidence. It's very true, but that point doesn't really get nearly enough attention. It's an incredibly powerful transformation that people undergo when they're become accustomed to looking at a crowd of people, whether it's online or in person, and holding their attention, right? Some of the most powerful people in the world have been people who were good at holding the attention of other people. And just the fact that you can do it, that you know how to do it, it works a remarkable change. It makes you feel powerful in the sense that you know how to bring people to respond to a call to action, say on an online case. But just as personally, you feel stronger, you believe in yourself more. And it's a wonderful kind of confident energy you can take with you anywhere, into any type of endeavor, whether it's business or personal. You know, maybe a lot of people want just to be able to lead their community group better or to be a captain of their sports team, and that's fine. Any way you use it is great, because I think the key thing is that we all struggle to some degree with a certain amount of self-doubt and negative self-talk. And public speaking it's a kind of panacea for it. Just simply because you're putting yourself out there, you're used to it, you do it all the time. But a lot of people out there, they don't understand about putting themselves out there. See, I happen to be an entertainer. I always have been. And I know you are to some degree too. I've seen you pound the piano. So it's quite natural for us to be in front of an audience and speak to an audience. But many people, they're lost. You know, I got to talk in front of an audience. What do I do? How do I do that? What does that mean? It's kind of like driving a car, I used to say. The first time you get in front of a crowd, no matter where it is, it's like there's this great beast. How do I control this thing? You know, it's if you remember the first time you got in a car, it's like a tank. Well, how do I do this? That's kind of like what an audience is, except it may have like 20 heads and 40 legs, you know, depending on how many people you're speaking to. So all that is a wonderfully personally strengthening and energizing activity to do. So in a sense, I'm not just showing you how to do your job better in business. I'm showing you how to become a more confident person who really can use the tools you gain for connecting with people and feeling good doing it.
I totally hear you on this. And it's especially the quote from Warren Buffett that you give in your video, How to Become a Super Speaker, is that when asked what is the number one thing that he would recommend people to do, I've heard that speech where he says the number one thing that I would recommend that you become good at is public speaking. So
and apparently sorry to interrupt you. Apparently the only piece of paper that Warren Buffett has on his wall in his office is from a public speaking course. And that's how much value he puts in the power of public speaking. Now, here's a man who earned amassed a fortune estimated at something like $80 billion. So I listened to him.
Probably worth listening to. Good. So Michael, people can, of course, watch that video of yours, How to Become a Super Speaker. It's going to be in the show notes. But if you could summarize what you see are the top 3 mindset shifts or mistakes that people make when delivering something publicly. And by the way, publicly, we also, of course, mean a webinar given online, right? A speech given on Zoom. It's not just standing on a stage, which these days, and especially in the last few 1.5 years, people have done less of. But what are 3 main things that people need to change their minds about or practice more in order to become better speakers?
You have to understand that wherever you're speaking, it could be in front of a camera like we're doing, it could be on a street corner, it could be on a formal proscenium arch stage, it could be anywhere. You're a performer. And so often people come out and they forget that they are performers on a stage who need to reach an audience. The people who are listening to you are an audience. And the way we're wired, audiences expect performers on stages to put on shows. And it doesn't really matter what the show is. You could be speaking at the funeral of a CEO. It's still a kind of a show. It's just a different kind of show. And you need to understand that the most important thing in speaking is not content. It's very easy to fall into that trap, what I would call the content trap, simply because we can get it so easily today. We can get any kind of content we want practically. But it doesn't matter how great your content is or how many hours you put into researching it, unless you have a way to put it across that gets attention and keeps attention. And some say you've only got 7 seconds to do it in the social media era, which I would agree. Now, here's the thing. Many years ago, 1970, there was an experiment where an actor was hired to portray an academic, and he spoke in front of a group of bona fide academics in California, I believe. It was some kind of teacher-related event. So they all were knowledgeable people in their field, and this fellow was introduced as an expert of some kind of nonsensical field, and he spoke. And he got great reviews from the audience. They didn't even think that this is gibberish, even though everything he was saying was in fact gibberish. This became known as the Dr. Fox experiment because his name was Michael Fox, no relation to Michael J. Fox, the actor from Family Ties. And in subsequent years, people tried to disprove this theory, and it just kept coming up the same way over and over again. The most important item in speaking or any kind of public connecting is the delivery.
But quick question on this. What kind of gibberish was it? It was still normal sentences, but if you kind of were to listen, it was not complete gibberish, right?
You can, by the way, you can see it on YouTube.
Okay, I'll find it on
you can see it on YouTube, but he made stuff up. And yeah, he was good at improvising, but apparently he had read, his only source of reference was like one issue of Psychology Today. Because it was supposed to be psychology and risk probability. I can't remember exactly what, something to do with like mathematical concepts in psychology or something. So that's what happened. That's what he did, and he just ran with it. But they just thought he was so charming and likable that they liked him. And that tells you about how the way audiences can be. That, you know, people are wonderfully equipped to achieve amazing things in the world.
Okay.
But the audiences, when they're audiences, they're kind of simple creatures in a lot of ways, who don't want everything. You don't want to kill an audience with every little bit of detail you got. You just want to give the right amount that's going to whet their interest, hold their interest, and entertain them along the way, because that's all they can handle. I mean, apparently there's research which shows that after 10 minutes, the average person stops hearing what's being said. They start to struggle to concentrate. Now that's interesting because TED Talks are 18 minutes or so, which in itself might be a push. But think back to the days, you know, of Abraham Lincoln. People were speaking like for 3 hours, and that's what made Lincoln's Gettysburg speech amazing. It was short because it was only something like 12 minutes. And he showed what you can do with just, you know, by keeping these concise and to the point. But that's the main thing is here. When you're talking about delivery, it's getting to the audience. The second most important thing is putting on the show because it is a show. And the third most important thing is letting your personality show. Now, I'm sure you and our viewers have been to conferences where there's been perhaps a parade of speakers all day, very knowledgeable people who dispensed worthwhile and interesting tips on some topic, right? Well, by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's all starting to go like this, right? It's all becoming a ball of, of facts. You start getting what's called speech fatigue. But what will happen often is that the speaker who was seemed the most human in the sense of showing quirks and personality traits and had some kind of a different little thing he did, she did, they are the ones who will stand out in your mind because they simply showed that they were more human, if you will, than the other folks. So that's the big three: delivery, the show, and personality. Now, then we get into that's my top three. Then we get into the whole thing about dealing with anxiety, which people try to fight. And that's not the way to do it. You must accept that if you're speaking, if you're gearing up for any sort of a public presentation, you're going to feel some anxiety. People do. The most accomplished and practiced speakers in the world get nervous, if you will, or they feel some anxiety. But you need it, because when that sense of, oh gosh, I got to talk giving up, it makes your brain work faster. You're ahead of the game. You're operating at top energy. You're thinking faster. Things just work better. And if you didn't tap into that kind of energy you get from being a little anxious, you might actually bore the crowd. So, but you don't want anxiety to get so out of control that it sabotages what you're doing. Because let's face it, people do get literally paralyzed with anxiety. And this has famously been documented in numerous surveys that, some people feel public speaking more than they do death. As Jerry Seinfeld once quipped, that means at a funeral, more people would rather be in the coffin, in the casket, than giving the eulogy, as Jerry Seinfeld once said. But the point is that just accept, I plan to get nervous before I give a talk. Okay, I'm going to get anxious here. And so come on in, make yourself at home, sit down. I'm talking to the anxiety now. And we've been here, we're old pals, okay? You just do what you do, and I'm going to do what I do, right? And it's all going to work out. In fact, I need you, all right?
I love that kind of personalization. I also very much, when you have kind of self-defeating, self-sabotaging thought, this is actually one thing we discussed with my wife in an earlier episode of this podcast, is to actually welcome those feelings in, to not try to fight them, but just to welcome them in. And then after a short conversation, show them the door, so that it sounds a little bit hokey, but this kind of personalization, giving it a name as well, works really well. And you get from this mindset of trying to fight something to just simply acknowledging that it's part of who you are, but that at some point they also need to take their things and go, and they are not welcome. Is that how you see it?
And there's no rules. I mean, whatever works for you is it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to me what you do. You can call it Oscar if you want. You can talk to it. It doesn't matter. That's fine. And I know there's a lawyer I knew I worked with once who had this problem. That was how, and she'd been a lawyer for years. And every time she had to go to do a case, she was dealing with the same old battle. And by now she'd be getting ready to go to the courtroom, and the little voice is telling her, you're a fraud. You're a fraud. Don't do this. Why are you doing this? You're a fraud. You have no right. And she says, yeah, you just run your mouth. I'm not paying attention to you. I'm just going to keep putting my makeup on here or whatever I'm doing. And went to the courtroom. So I love personifying things like that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Good. That's a great idea.
So really wonderful exposition. I really agree with this, putting on a show, doing a delivery, because there's just so much knowledge out there in the world. And the content is really so ubiquitous that if we have somebody who is able to deliver it in a compelling way, that this is the trump card that people are holding in order to get those exponential views and engagement on their content. When I think now in online terms, can you share, so you said you work with professionals, like what does that mean? Can you tell us, like, what kind of package do you offer to people? And also, is it the professionals themselves who invest working with you, or is it more the company that invests on the professional's behalf? How does one work with you?
I am emphasizing one-on-one right now. And I can do classes of groups, but my main interest at the moment is working with professionals. It could be executives, teachers, business people, as I said, lawyers, any kind of business professional will work with this program. And it's the flagship program I have is called 5 Weeks to Become a World-Class Speaker on Social Media. Right now, given the state of the world and the business, it's very important that people learn how to express themselves and to communicate well online. It looks to me like we're not going back the way we were before the pandemic. Companies see that they can save money by renting a space instead of owning a space, or they're even allowing more people to work from home. As a result, it exposes the number of people who are communicating and doing business on tools like this, like Zoom or any kind of third-party conferencing application, actually are exposing their weaknesses if they don't speak well. So in a way, if you are a little bit of a show person, if you do understand, I mean, what it's like to be on this type of stage, you do wield a kind of advantage over others, over your colleagues, and that can have certain implications for one's employment prospects looking forward, I believe, because we're just going to continue becoming more online oriented, I believe. I still love the live talk, but this is what we are going to be seeing more of. So as a result, my goal is to help people navigate this sometimes confusing medium, because one of the most disorienting things when you're speaking like this is having to look at that dot, the camera. Well, how do I look at this dot but look at him? How do I look at the dot but look at him? These sort of things are off-putting to people. And plus, they claim they can't feel the audience, which I understand. The truth is, by now, we've done this for so long already, like intensely, that I don't find I even think about it so much anymore. But I have a feeling a lot of other people may still get thrown by a loop. The other important point that makes it imperative to have a strong delivery is that it's so easy to get distracted on this end. For example, here in New Jersey, I could be in a call, you would hear a lawnmower going outside, a barking dog, a garbage truck going by, and you've probably seen videos where people are speaking on Zoom and a kid comes in the doorway and walks right into the picture, or a nanny pulling the kid back or something like that. Whoops, sorry, that kind of thing. So those sorts of distractions are also part of speaking this way. And that's one reason why you need to get their attention, but you also want to try to know how to make this type of presentation more interesting by mixing things up. You can take polls, you can do surveys, you can show videos, we could share screen and look at documents. You have to keep things moving pretty rapidly and provide a varied type of experience for a viewer on Zoom, I think, for the most part.
Yeah,
so that's one thing that I emphasize a lot.
Cool.
But the point is that when you come through my program, my aim is to make it so that whenever you're speaking publicly, it will seem more like a conversation, because every good bit of speaking is that. It's a dialogue. It's a back and forth. So even when you may not be expecting a response from the audience at that point, there should be a feeling of openness, of two-way communication. And it's a little harder to feel that through the online medium, but that is your goal. Then I break down my program into 5 modules. Getting back to the idea, it's a package. The first one deals with confidence issues, everything from understanding your roadblocks and pushing through comfort zones, accepting that you're a performer, as I said, and embracing your personal story, because there's a lot of strength in that. Then module 2 is about speaking to specific events online, like meetings, presentations, webinars, speaking impromptu situations. If the boss says, "Say, Mike, what's the update on that XYZ project?" You need to do that a lot. And doing videos, which is a separate field in itself and becoming very important, because the thing is on LinkedIn, a video may not get as many views, say, as just a plain old post with no picture, but it gets engagement. People will see a person who's emoting and showing feelings and really putting out this emotional energy will resonate with an audience more strongly, I think, than just a plain old post does, or even just a picture. And yet people get so obsessed with counting views, which really don't make a lot of difference in most ways, that's overlooked, that gets overlooked, the power of video to resonate people and to strike a chord with them. Then my next module is about preparing you for making sure that your text is easy to follow, because an audience for speech doesn't have the luxury of being able to play things backwards and forwards. So once it goes by you, it's gone. You have to give them landmarks that they can follow, signposts. You learn how to, we talk about things like lighting, audio, and dealing with the anxiety, as I've mentioned, and making things like rehearsals very, very useful. Because even if I gave you, if I came to you like at a function, I said, say like, we were going to have a speaker, but they dropped out. Would you mind just saying a couple of words? I'm sorry to give you late notice, but it would be so good if you could do that. Sure. About 10 minutes. Okay. So then you quickly take your napkin, assuming you have a pen in your pocket or your phone, whatever you want to do, and you make a couple of points that you want to cover. Yeah, I could talk about this. I'll do that little intro, that little thing that I did last year. That worked pretty well. And this, and I'll just send them off with this. So you learn quickly how to maximize your opportunities to plan something that will reach an audience. You're planning your little show, even if you've only got 10 minutes to do it. Then we also talk about things. Let me see now. Give me an opportunity. Oh yeah, an important thing I didn't mention to you is that to be engaging, in addition to making the delivery the priority, putting on a show and putting on personality, you want to give them a reason to care. Because you've probably been to talks where somebody is speaking and talking and talking and talking, and you're saying to yourself, okay, why am I interested in this? Why does this matter to me? Because so often, just the addition of a little bit of contextual information or detail will explain to the audience why this matters in the big picture, right? If you're talking about, say, some policy and blah, 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 it would help if you put it in context by explaining that this policy marked a departure that for the first time in a half a century that, British environmental policy was suddenly focused on this and something like that. Just something like that lets them understand why they need to care about this. And similarly, you need to be able to reveal your emotions so that preferably you can connect with your topic so strongly that you can't help revealing strong feelings about your topic, because the audience will feel that and they'll move towards you when they feel that.
Absolutely.
And I would argue that's the key. If you want to give an effective talk, try to organize your talk so it's going to get the most out of you. It's going to arouse you emotionally.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Very important.
So you have this 5-week program. That's your flagship program.
Yes.
What is, I'm particularly curious because the theme of the podcast, of course, about client acquisition. So I wonder, what have you done in the recent past that has worked for you in terms of client acquisition?
I'm working with an excellent coach right now. I'm following his model. May I say his name? Is that okay?
Of course.
His name is Sarim Asadi. And the approach we're taking involves, it's a mixture of things. It's not just about giving value all the time, because it's important to give value, except that it's been said that people don't necessarily invest in coaching, they invest in coaches. And it makes sense because, if you're looking for a piano teacher, which I expect you need, I would tell you, find somebody and talk to them, ask them what they will do for you. But most of all, find out if you'd like them, if you feel somebody you'd feel comfortable with. And I think it's the same thing with a speaking coach or any other kind of coach or any type of teacher who you're going to entrust your development to. You have to feel good with them. You have to like them. I'm not talking about liking in the sense of winning a high school popularity contest. This is about whether they resonate with you in your soul and you feel you would like to work with this person and you'd like to put your development in their hands. So that's a key point. So to attract clients, I think it's important that I also show my audience or my prospective clients that what I speak about makes me feel passionate, because it does. And this is an interesting thing I'm learning here, is that every time I hold a conversation with a prospective client or someone who becomes a client, I find I talk about it differently with each person. And I expect that that's my tuning into where they are, which I think is a good performance skill. But it's just that I also keep discovering so much more that I love about this topic. So you see, so getting back to the clients, like, I'm in love with the whole notion of getting the audience's attention, holding them, enriching their lives by giving them information they want, but also achieving business goals, say by persuading them to follow a call to action. I think it all fits together. But I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't truly in my soul love this. And I do believe that the prospect feels that once I get going and talking about it in our business conversations and in our sales conversations, if you will.
Okay. So are you exclusively relying on inbound, meaning you put out great content? Is this what you're working with your coach on, that the content really resonates with the audience? And the hope is that once enough people see your content, that they will come to you. Is that the primary method you're following?
Well, that's part of it. Yes, definitely. You hope people will like your content, and then I can start a conversation. Hey, I see thank you for liking my content. I see that you're a speaker too, or you're a guitar player too, or something like that. And we have a chat. And as I noticed you've said in one of your podcasts, and you strike a kind of confident middle ground where it's just a kind of easy conversation, just getting to know you. But at some point, once I need to find out if speaking is something that really matters to them. Do they really care about public speaking? Because some people just are interested in getting tips or something else, or they just want to be followers sometimes. And not only that, but do they want my help, which is, I would say, the most important thing. So there's a few other things we can do in addition to having a conversation that can lead you towards a deeper type of conversation. I have a video, for example. Now, this is something I think I created since you and I first met, which gives you a quick tool to help you immediately become a stronger speaker. It's based actually on the principles from my book, which which emphasizes the importance of arousing listeners emotionally. And it breaks down great speeches into 4 phases. I call it the 4 phases of a great speech. And there's the hook, the attention phase, the information phase, and the buy-in phase. So this video talks about it. But along the way, I encourage them to get in touch with me if they want to learn more.
Okay.
And so that's one tool that uses it. And of course, the video will make a link available for setting up a date.
So basically, that's a webinar.
Yeah, kind of. Yes, I suppose you could call it that.
Okay, good. And that webinar, do you drive traffic to it via ads, or are you purely doing organic these days?
No ads, just organic.
Okay, and that funnel that you've set up with this webinar, and that works for you? Do you then book calls, and then once you get somebody on a call, you then explore, and if you think that you could be useful to them, then you make them an offer. Is that right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Do you have a 1 call model, or do you do 2 separate calls, or just one?
Well, I think one, I try to keep things fairly concise. There's the initial encounter with the content, usually. Then there's a chat of some sort. And then we do want to have the call offline for the most part. So okay. I don't know how many steps you call that. It sounds like separate steps to me.
No. I follow a 2-call model usually, just a 15-minute orientation just to get to know each other, because it's also for my own benefit, because sometimes you get people who are slightly less, let's say they're slightly less than serious. So there I want to limit it to 15 minutes. And this has worked really well for me. I would recommend you consider doing that as well, is that I have a very specific video created that I ask people to watch between call 1 and call 2. So the first call is just to get to know each other and seeing if there is even like remotely a possible fit. Possibly I need to explain my method to them a little bit, but just very cursorily. And then when they think, yeah, this actually sounds like something I might be interested in, then I schedule another call with them, a longer one, 45 minutes. And I ask them to watch this one video, which is 20 minutes, and they can accelerate it. So let's say 15 minutes of watching time. And that tells them a lot of things about my program, also shows a few disqualifiers. Like, if you don't have 10 hours a week to work on this, then please cancel the call, and so on. And that has worked enormously for me because, first of all, people come into the second call with a great frame because they are more serious about it. Also, the people who don't want to watch it, they kind of disqualify themselves, right? Because if they say, no, I'm not going to watch it, then I say, okay, then maybe it's not a good idea to reconnect because you obviously don't want to invest in this, right? And so it has many, many benefits. And some people actually watch it and say, oh, I didn't realize this was not a done for you service or something like this. And then they disqualify themselves, right? Saying, okay, I canceled the call. And that's great because, yes, it's one call less, but it's one call that would not have converted anyway. So this 2-call model works really well for me if you have a video in between. It has doubled my conversion rate overall. So
wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, that works really well.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I think my video is about 9 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So that webinar thingy that we call the webinar is 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Maybe 8.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's great. Okay. And so what are your growth plans for the second half of the year, let's say, in your business?
I would like to keep adding clients. The program does fill up to some degree. Now, one thing I haven't pointed out to you is that I am still working at my other job as a journalist, part-time. So my time has to be managed wisely in a lot of ways because I only have so many hours at this point to take one-on-one sessions, and that's the way that's working right now.
Okay. So Michael, you showed some interest in the topic of the wider field of concern. This is one of the main reasons why we connected. So is there something I can tell you about it? Should I give you like a broad overview and then you have a few questions on it? Or
yes.
Yeah. So it was a big revelation for me. The wider field of concern is something that helps you to break through those moments when on prospecting chats, when you're on one-on-one with somebody, for example, on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you're just having in the DMs, you're having a conversation, and somehow it starts to falter, or you don't really know what to say next. And very often what people default to is to say something like, okay, so in my world, for example, it would be, okay, so how do you get clients, right? Or something that just goes too directly into the topic you want to discuss. And very frequently this ends the conversation, right? When you transition from rapport into, okay, now I'm going to talk about my topic, hi there, Michael. Yeah, it's you have a great background there. Oh, you play guitar. I play guitar as well. Okay, fine. Once you get past the rapport stage, then what? And what I found to be an amazing and really useful connective tissue between rapport and really talking business is the wider field of concern theory. And what does that mean? The wider field of concern is the area of topics that your counterpart is interested in, that is in your purview, but that is not directly the topic that you help with. So let me just, this was the abstract definition. Let me tell you a very good example. One of my clients is a book coach. So he helps people to write their own book. And what does that help people do? When you write a book, what is that? You've written a book, right? Why did you write the book? Tell me.
Because I had something to say about public speaking that I wanted to share with people who needed to hear it.
Why did you want to share it?
Well, I wanted to be a speaker at the time and to speak to conferences and events and that kind of thing, but I also wanted to coach.
Okay, you wanted to coach, meaning you wanted to speak at events, you wanted to coach, meaning you wanted more exposure for yourself. If we take it purely selfishly, you wanted, at least part of your reasons why you wrote the book were goals that were for yourself. right?
Yes.
You wanted
Yes.
to get exposure, to get recognized as an expert in the field, get clients, right?
Yes.
That is the wider field of concern for you. For my client who is a book coach, he will not only, and this is the thing, this is the mistake that he and some others very frequently do, is that they instantly get into this questioning. So, have you ever thought about writing a book? Crickets, because that's too close to home for him.
Mm-hmm.
However, if he applied the wider field of concern theory and he's talking to you, Michael, he would not ask, so have you thought about writing a book? Assuming you hadn't written a book already. But he would ask you, hey, Michael, so how do you get clients for your public speaking coaching business, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have you done that has worked? Which is, given that he's a book coach, you, Michael, you know that he is a book coach. So it's obviously he would be interested in selling you his book coaching services. But because he asks you about the wider field of concern that is still in his purview, he will not ask you about your eating habits because he's not a weight loss coach. So he's not going to talk to you about that. But given that one of your concerns of writing the book or motivations for writing the book was to do client acquisition, to get more exposure, to get more recognition, this is what he's going to be asking you about. So he will ask you, so Michael, how are you getting clients? Have you done much public speaking? Have you ever thought of doing a TEDx talk or something like this? Because he knows that this is in his area and that he can find out more about you. And those are all things that you would presumably be interested in pursuing. So the wider field of concern for somebody like you is, how is Michael Barris getting clients? How is he showcasing his unique expertise to the world? What has Michael Barris tried to get noticed? So that is the wider field of concern. And the practical application of it is really in prospecting conversations, in conversations on LinkedIn or Facebook, where you just try to build a relationship and connect the rapport stage to the true exploration stage. Does that make sense?
Yes, but can you give me another example so I can
Sure.
get a feeling?
Sure. So, for example, if you imagine a coach who would be there's many coaches out there for insecure and stressed professionals, right?
Okay.
Now, you could ask them the narrow field of concern. The immediate thing that the coach wants to find out about them is, do you have confidence issues? Are there situations where a lack of confidence is holding you back? That's the narrow field of concern, and it's not ideal to start the questioning there. However, a wider field of concern is, how are you getting ahead in your career? How long ago is your last promotion? Do you have a plan for the next 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's the wider field of concern, because this is something that it doesn't hew as closely to the bone as asking directly about confidence issues would go. So people are much more likely to open up.
Right.
So you would say, what are your plans for the next 5 years in your career? And the person would say, yeah, I want to get promoted and so on. Oh, great. Okay. So when was their last promotion? Yeah, it's 5 years ago. Oh, wow. Well, how come 5 years? And then you slowly get to the topic of confidence. Not always. Sometimes you will realize that they don't have confidence issues, in which case you will just move on because you're not somebody who can help them. But you have a far higher likelihood of actually getting to the hypothetical confidence issues if you start in the wider field of concern, if that is the conversational framework that you operate in.
Right. And to figure out the wider field of concern, you're studying their profile, presumably, right? That's how you determine it.
Absolutely. That is one thing, because it also tells you a lot about what are their aspirations. But very often the wider field of concern is also simply about just thinking and reflecting and just experience. What does somebody in their situation usually want? You can, I would say with 90% accuracy, if you really think about it, right? If you know your audience, you know what people want. When they have recently been promoted to VP of sales, right? So what will be their primary concerns? Getting accepted by the team, showing results, having good retention of their staff, and so on, right? You can imagine what are their primary concerns. And that's what you then start a conversation on.
It's a funny thing because when we were talking earlier, another insight I had is that it's very important, I think, to try to connect with your real feelings about a topic, one way or another. So the more genuine if you can say something honestly, truthfully that you feel when you're speaking to somebody, it would seem to go a longer way than something that like any kind of script. Obviously a script isn't going to cut it, but that to me would be a guideline too. Am I right?
100%. And this is so important. And this is one of the things that, as I was working with, especially that book coach client of mine, is that you need to be genuinely interested in the person. It's very hard to fake the wider field of concern because you will not come up with good questions if you don't really think about things from their perspective, if you don't put yourself in their shoes. So couldn't agree more. It's absolutely highly a huge prerequisite that you actually genuinely care about them, which to be honest, most coaches actually do. They just need to bundle that energy into a coherent framework, which I found the wider field of concern framework to be very well suited for.
Yeah, very interesting. I like that.
Let's talk about the wider field of concern for your clients, your prospective clients. What would that be?
Well, let's say, I get a range of people. So say, for example, I'm trying to think of one I had a conversation with who would be a good one right now. For example, let's say it's someone who works for an insurance company. They're kind of in a middle management position. They do a lot of speaking. They have to report to higher ups a lot. And I don't know if we're going to throw this into, but as a woman, she did confess for me that it's a little different for her than she thought it would be for a man, because she may be regarded a little bit differently in the company. So there's a challenge right there. Somebody who could be asked for reports or to talk a lot about how a project is going on, that kind of thing, before a small group of could be executives. I would say that kind of thing.
Okay, good. So, for example, the wider field of concern would suggest to me that a good question to her would be, how are you doing in presentations, or generally when you are speaking in your company? Do you feel that people pay attention to you?
That's good. I like that.
It's relatively close. It's close to the narrow field of concern because you're talking about public speaking ultimately, right? So maybe a slightly wider area would be, what is important for you to actually get ahead in your role? And do you actually want to? I would even start, do you want to get ahead in your role? Or are you happy with where you are? Or would you like to get promoted, more recognition, and so on? That would be the first one. Because
isn't that getting a little too familiar right away when you don't really have a rapport yet?
No, of course, but the precondition for the wider field of concern is that you have built some rapport.
I see.
Right? As I mentioned, first comes rapport building, then comes wider field of concern, and then you do true exploration of their need and offering a call. Right? And the wider field of concern can permeate pretty much everything, but it's like, if you had to place it, it's between those two areas. Right?
I get it.
Once you have built, of course, that would not be the very first question. Yes, the first question is more about, a great piece of content that you shared there. I really like your perspective on blah, blah, blah. Oh, and so on, a bit of back and forth. And then you say, hey, so I saw that you were promoted to your current role only the last 3 months. How's it going? How are you enjoying it? Right? And then she tells you, oh yeah, no, it's great. Although like dealing with my the new expectations of the role, that's pretty challenging. Oh, really? Oh, what is challenging about it? Right. And she said, well, I sometimes feel that, especially as a woman, I'm in a male-dominated area. That tends to be quite tricky. And if she kind of stays vague like this, you go, interesting. What is like the number one thing that you would pinpoint that is tricky for you? It's like, right. And so she would then tell you, and that's how you then get closer to the topic of interest for her. Does it make sense?
Very interesting. Yeah, I like it. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So this is part of what you do, right? With your coach, that you also start conversations with strangers.
Oh, totally.
Okay. Great. Okay, great. So I hope you can apply it, and that it will be useful, that you can actually get people on the phone with that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it isn't. It is. I like that one question you framed there. That was a good one.
Which one? Which one?
When you do presentations, how's it going? Something
Yeah.
like
Do
that.
people pay attention to you? Right.
Do people pay attention to you? I think that was good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or do you sometimes see that people's attention is faltering, that they're fidgeting, and so on? And does that create, of course, probably gets you anxious a little bit? What do you do then when that happens?
I like that. Yeah. Good.
Right. That's already very close. So you're already now in the narrow field of concern here.
Yeah.
Right. That is not a place to start, but yeah, that's a decent explanation, I would say.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have are you tracking your numbers? Is it like how many conversations out of those that you start result in a call? Do you have that?
I try to do about 20. Well, not 20 a day, but the goal is probably over, again, because I'm working on it 5 days a week. So the numbers skew a little bit, and I sort of kind of grab it when I can a lot, but it could have a few conversations in a day. That's not unusual. I could have like 3 in one day.
Okay.
I could have 1 in one day. I could have 5 in one day. It kind of depends. And some degree, we're still, in some cases, I'm still developing content and tools and things, which I think also changes what I'm doing right now.
Okay. So one thing that has worked really well for me that I always recommend people that they do is that you have some form of like conversation tree. It's not a script, but it's more like that you move people along, because it's very easy to also get lost in a LinkedIn conversation where you just go chit chat and it doesn't really go anywhere. You explore, but then you kind of, okay, how do I get now to the point of offering a call if I think that I can help? And if you have a few set conversational pieces in a conversation tree, if she says that, I say this, that could really help you to keep the conversation a little bit structured and get you to the point where you at some point will offer the call, and some people will say no, some people will say yes. But if you follow that path, then you can actually get some people on the call, and very importantly, track your numbers so that you know, okay, for every 10 conversations I start, I get 1 call, which would be a pretty decent ratio.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for jumping on the phone. It was a great exchange. I loved your tips about the performance, the putting on a show. It's definitely something that our audience will be able to apply to what they are doing. If people wanted to work with you, where should they go?
Well, you should connect with me on LinkedIn.
The link is going to be in the show notes for sure. So LinkedIn is the primary path to connect with you?
Yes, I have a website, but let's face it, LinkedIn is the most important channel now. I really focusing mainly on LinkedIn. That's what I do. I go on Facebook somewhat, but really my prime audience, my target audience, if you will, is on LinkedIn, and that's where they can find me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed your questions. I like the tough love.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
The State of Client Acquisition is a Content 360 production. Music by Gavin Knox-Grand. To sign up for alerts and to submit written and audio questions, go to stateofclientacquisition.com. I'll talk to you in the next episode.
Montreal girls in the tail end of winter. Caffeine burns, wide awake dreams in color. Blood on my hands in this open heart journey. And infinite numbers, rapid fire across the country. We slide tonight.